All right, good afternoon, everybody. I realize from a timing perspective, I'm going to start with, I'm from Texas, and we have a tendency to put 10 pounds of manure in a 5-pound bag. I just did that. So we've got a lot of information we're going to try to get through. I'm going to move very rapidly as we go through this, and there's a lot going on in our industry, in the world, and you'll see that we have a thought process of connecting the dots, and connecting the dots at ALHI is how do we take all this information and try to make some sense out of it, and that's what I'm going to try to do today. More than anything, I don't care about a number. I care about the trend line. I care about what it's telling us, and more importantly, what does it mean to you as either personally or professionally, what you need to be doing with it. We have a luxury magazine, and this was one of our covers with Carrie Walsh, who still gives me a hard time because I dropped her gold medal when she gave it to me, just to hold it. I didn't know they were that heavy, by the way. But we wrote an article, and this is the reason I'm pointing this out. There was an article about small screen, big lessons. And one of the things I talk about is, when the writer's strike happened, all media stopped. There was no more TV, there were no more movies, and you'll read a great book to be inspired, and we sometimes forget. Some of the best lines in movies, as good as the actors are, somebody wrote that. And that writing is somewhat inspirational. And I take great lessons from this, and sometimes meaning that of trying to make an example of what I'm trying to get across. So I wanted to show you a clip. I'm a big fan of The Bear, if you have not seen The Bear. And The Bear is a hard one to watch season 1. It's excruciating emotionally. But if you can get through it, season 2 to me is one of the best examples from a leadership perspective of what happens when you believe in people and what you can accomplish when you believe in people. And if you don't know what The Bear's about, it's the culinary scene. The bear is the chef of the world and comes back to his hometown to take over a sandwich shop that his family had, but he's going to make that that sandwich shop a 5-star restaurant. But he's going to do it with the staff that's there. He's going to teach them how to actually make that kind of restaurant. So I want to show you a clip because the message I take away is about being open. And, especially knowing we're in a faith-based community, sometimes we are not hearing and we're not seeing the signs, and it's being open to what's going on around the world. So in this clip, you're going to see the young man asking the questions. He has actually been sent to one of the top pastry chefs in the world. And he's in Europe with his pastry chef, and he's just asking questions and talking about life. But the lesson from that pastry chef, I think, has great meaning for all of us. So I'm going to start here as we get going.
Honestly, I've made a lot of mistakes.
That's the secret? Just fuck up?
It might be, fuck up. I think as I started early, I got my skill set up really quick, and then started to feel like I was really the best, Like at all these really good places, I really was the best cook. And then I started at this really great place as a commie, and this other chef started the same day as me. And I thought we were competition, but really we weren't. He was better than me, much, much better than me. He worked harder and faster than I ever could. And it was the first time I realized that I wasn't the best, and I was never gonna be the best. So I started looking at it like it was a good thing. Like at least I knew who the best was now, and I could take that pressure off myself. And the only logical thing to do was to try and keep up with him. So I never left this guy's side.
And you got better?
Oh, mate, I got better than I ever thought I possibly could be, just from trying to keep up with him.
You're like Pippen.
Who's Pippen?
Scottie Pippen. He was like that with Michael Jordan.
Who's Michael Jordan?
I know you know who Michael Jordan is.
Yeah, no, we've heard of him in London, yeah. Yeah, I guess I was like Scotty.
But he was a Hall of Famer, though. Number 33.
Honored. No, but I think at a certain stage it becomes less about skill and it's more about being open.
Open?
Yeah, to the world, to yourself, to other people. Most of the incredible things I've eaten haven't been because the skill level is exceptionally high or there's loads of mad, fancy techniques. It's because it's been really inspired.
I like that.
You can spend all the time in the world in here, but if you don't spend enough time out there,
Right.
Helps to have good people around you too.
So was it worth it? The time you put in?
I don't know. Ask me tomorrow.
That is the bear in a capsule. It is a lot of dialogue and a lot of emotion, but you heard about be open and being open to the world. And when I look at the meetings industry, I joke about that because we become so insular. And in your own industry, you become insular. And when you're trying to create something, I love the message of the greatest things I've ever eaten were inspired, not great technique. I sometimes think we miss the inspiration. It's one of the reasons I love coming to this meeting. This meeting is always about inspiration. I attend enough other meetings, I promise you it's not. And that's a little bit of a challenge in our industry as a whole. But the reason I say be open, there is so much change going on in the world that you need to be aware of. And one of the biggest changes, there's a dynamic business change that most people aren't talking about. And if you look at this chart, everywhere you see density of color, that is density of population and density of businesses that are moving to that part of the country. It is a story of the Southeast today. Everything is moving between Texas and Florida. It's not Texas and Florida, everything in between. Arkansas is on fire. The Carolinas are on fire. You're seeing tremendous population growth, and this is changing where people travel from. Think about you planning a meeting. Don't assume that your people are coming from the same place they were a couple years ago. They are going to be traveling to different destinations. Do they have to connect, and what does that look like? But when you look at the business movement, every one of those lines you see, every one of those little curves is another corporation headed to Dallas, Texas. I live in Dallas, Texas, and I have one message for everybody: please stop, because the traffic is starting to get intense. But everybody is moving to Dallas. Texas is now the #1 state for Fortune Top 500 corporation headquarters, overtaking California and New York. 2 years in a row now, kind of under the radar. And the thing that stands out to me, when you look at that purple line, there are more people actually employed in finance and insurance in the state of Texas than the state of New York. Overnight, Texas has become the financial headquarters of the United States. It has taken over the New York headquarters. And guess what happens when money comes somewhere? Money comes, and it keeps coming. And more businesses are coming to Texas because of that. And the reason that matters, BlackRock announced with Citadel that they were launching a stock exchange. That was over a year ago, and nobody paid attention. That this BlackRock stock exchange now is actually, they have actually had the largest capital raise of any stock exchange in history. It will start in April of 2026, and the Chicago Stock Exchange will be no more. Texas will be the new stock exchange in the U.S. under the NYSE umbrella, but it is telling you that Texas is now the headquarters of the finance and insurance in the world, and I would venture to say of business in the United States because of the money that's going to be there. That is a dramatic shift. If you're a hotelier in this room, how you're deployed in the Southeast, how you're deployed against Texas, that is something you have to figure out. And, you know, I don't want to be the director of sales that's trying to figure out on who's getting credit for the corporate headquarters that's now moved to Texas, because that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. But on the meeting side, this is a challenge as well. And when you look at this chart, that bottom line is U.S. population growth. Every line above it is another Texas city's population growth over the next 3 to 4 years. It is not slowing down anytime soon. And you can see it's Dallas, it's Houston, it's Austin on fire, and Texas has that kind of growth as well, pacing well over that. Texas is also one of those states, it's running with an $80 billion surplus. So it doesn't have some of the problems the other states are. It's low regulation, no state tax, running with a surplus, good school system. It's actually doing some things well. $80 billion surplus started 2 years ago, 2 years in a row, and they just did another one. They are actually lowering real estate taxes for the next 40 years, giving back the $80 billion to the people. Because the government actually believes, or the governor believes, that that's not ours to figure out how to spend. If we didn't need it, it needs to go back to the people. So over the next 40 years, they have actually extended the homestead exemption, literally increased it by over 30% over the next 2 years, or over the 2-year window, it's increased by 30%, but it's over the next 40 years. It will save most people on average a couple of $1,000s a year for the next 40 years. That is what is happening in Texas, and you don't hear a lot about it, but that's kind of the anchor and the linchpin for everything else that's happening around the Southeast. Pay attention to it. The Southeast right now is 25% of the U.S. GDP. That is what it means to the world today, or especially to our world today. It's going to be an important one. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the hotel industry. And when you look at the hotel industry, I want to start from a global perspective just very quickly. The light purple shows you RevPAR growth around the globe. And the one thing I wanted to point out, It is positive everywhere except for China. China has its own issues, so you can kind of put that to the side. But everywhere else, we're seeing a real strong hospitality industry. And in the hotel industry, we're doing okay, but I thought this was really important. Please know in the Americas, we are not back to the occupancies yet of 2019. Now, we have record demand, but we're not back to the occupancies. And I know that sounds confusing, but demand is how many rooms people want. Occupancy is how many are filled. And the reason that doesn't match up is because we've had new supply coming in over that time frame. So we're growing at about 2% because supply has been growing at about 2% over those couple of years. But here's probably the biggest takeaway. If all of you think that going to meetings is expensive, it's because traveling is expensive. And it is not going to change anytime soon. And if you look at this right now, in the Americas, we are actually 32% higher than we were in 2019 in actual ADR. This is average daily rate. But if you look at what's going on in Europe, they're 55% higher. And it's not going backwards. And by the way, I'm going to show you the why it can't go backwards. This is transient ADR. So this is a transient average daily rate. When we say transient, it's all non-group. It doesn't matter what channel it came through. If it's in the group bucket, it ends up in the group bucket. Everything else ends up in transient. And what you'll see, these are the top 25 markets in the United States. What you can see is that about half the markets are up, half the markets are down. If I took the top 5 markets, they're only up by 2%. It's not a lot of growth on the transient side, but we know transient kind of led the charge out of the pandemic. But here's the group picture. So everybody planning meetings, you can see all of the growth on an annual basis is coming in the group market. And this is what you'll be competing with when you're looking for space and you're looking for your meetings and you're trying to place it. And the group is moving now. It doesn't mean group is more expensive than transient. It just is growing faster than transient because transient is already flattened out. It's already gotten to its peak. Group, we're not quite there yet. And you'll see this on a group chart I'm going to show you. We still have a little ways to go to get back to 2019, and then we'll flatten out a little bit. But and you got to take everything with a grain of salt. Phoenix being down, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with Phoenix. That's a hard calendar comparison because they had Super Bowl and Final Four. That's just a hard one to compare against. Doesn't mean the destination's down. It's just a really, really tough comparison. But the one thing that has been consistent, and I keep stressing this, we have a bifurcated consumer and a bifurcated economy and a bifurcated industry. And what I mean by that is we have luxury buyers and bargain shoppers. The bargain shoppers are struggling right now. The luxury buyers are not slowing down anytime soon. And you're seeing it on this chart. It is the mid-scale and economy sections of our business that are actually declining. Everything else is growing. The reason that's a problem, guess where all our meeting space is? Luxury, upper upscale, upscale. So mid-scale and economy means nothing except we have more mid-scale and economy as hotels as an industry. They're overweighting the index and dragging down the overall average. So when you see that rates are only growing at 1.8% and you get a proposal from a hotel with a 5% increase, that's the disconnect. Because that 1.8% includes all the mid-scale and economy hotels in our industry that are declining, and you'll see it here. It's really clear. Luxury, upper upscale, not a problem, we are growing. But if you look at the economy and mid-scale, we are shrinking. This is the same reason I say in an overall economy, Louis Vuitton is doing really well and the dollar store filed for bankruptcy. That's the split in the consumer, and we're seeing it in the hotel business as well. And when you look at the luxury buyers, you can see that 60% of all hotel spending is coming from the upper tier of earners. $150,000 and above is 43% of all hotel revenue. And that money isn't slowing down anytime soon. That luxury spender is not going to slow down. And I could get into a much larger demographic discussion, but the boomer is the oldest and longest living and wealthiest generation in the history of mankind. And the issue is right now at 74, they are required to take out 401k plan money and have a withdrawal even if they don't need it. And they don't need it. And by the way, we're finding because of that, they are spending it, and they are spending it on experiences and travel. And that is not going to slow down. And by the way, there's only $25 trillion sitting in 401k plans. They were the birth of the 401k plan. And that I don't think has been factored into anywhere because I think that's GDP growth. I also think it's taxation because they will start being taxed on that money when they weren't taxed on it for over the last 30 years. That's all healthy for the economy. And it hasn't been factored into any of the modeling yet because it's not quite real, but we're gonna get really dense with the amount of people that are having a required withdrawal from their 401k plans. It's right around the corner. And what you'll see on this line, that orange line, is actually luxury room demand, and luxury room demand is outpacing every other index. It's outpacing the S&P, it's outpacing the Dow, it's outpacing the Case-Shiller index. I mentioned the Case-Shiller index, and it always kind of throws people a little bit. The Case-Shiller index, to me, is the closest index you should be monitoring in the hotel industry if you're looking at discretionary spend and how the consumer is going to behave. The Case-Shiller index is really about our home wealth, what our home is worth and what the value is, and literally 80% of the population, most of their net worth is in their home. So when our home has value, we feel rich. And we spend like we have that money in cash, even though it's sitting in an asset. Case-Shiller index is the one you look at. You look at 2008, the Case-Shiller index declined and crashed. And that is when we had the Great Recession for about 9 years. And it was a sluggish index for about 9 years, and then it took off. And it has continued to take off right now, and it's continuing to grow. I think this is why every time you see a TV report, they keep talking about the surprising resilient consumer. The consumer is resilient because they have wealth sitting either in savings or sitting in their home. And if you have that, that's kind of your backstop, which means I can spend my paycheck, but I have savings, and I feel good. That's what I think we're seeing in a consumer across the board. This is probably the biggest surprise and shift in the dynamics of our industry. You can see in the Americas, we now have 155 hotels in the Americas. So that, when we say the Americas, that means Canada and Mexico, including the United States. We have 155 hotels that have a $1,000 average rate for the year. That's their average rate, which means most of the times they're well over $1,000. And the reason this should matter to you, this starts to set price points in certain markets. And the interesting part is, if you look at where it is, in the United States, 4 times as many hotels that are over $1,000 than was in 2019. I go back to the wealthy audience that has no slowdown, and it's not going to slow down. And what I find really surprising, look at Mexico. Mexico used to be the cheap destination. They have 21 hotels today that are over $1,000 on average rate for the year. That is telling you there's a dramatic shift in the luxury and upper scale segment. And if you're planning meetings, unfortunately, it's setting pricing. It also is setting competition for meetings that are wanting to go into certain markets. Now, most of us wouldn't be going into these type of hotels, but an incentive program with major corporations would be. Those incentive programs, this is what they're competing with. And now it's not a surprise to me when I know we've seen contracts be booked at $800 a night. It's actually a value when the average rate is $1,000. That's actually a really good discount for that type of hotel and that type of experience. It is a shift in the luxury upper upscale and upscale segments. The reason that matters, that's where the meeting space is. I can't stress that enough. And we're seeing that kind of wealth and that dynamic shift in there. And if you look at the breakdown, this is what I was talking about. The dark blue, or the bright blue on this chart is 2024. The darker navy blue is 2023. And you can see this is just group demand. Group demand is catching up. Gray is 2019. We're not quite back to 2019, but we're getting there. You have to take some of this with a grain of salt because it was a hard comparison year. You can see March is down to 23, and then you see April up. That is Easter moving into March. It completely messes up our comparisons as a hotel industry when it doesn't. And it's just right on the edge. So you have to take the 2 months together to try to determine what it really means. And you see the same thing in September and October because the Jewish holidays moved into October versus September. The Jewish holidays are disruptive to the group patterns during that holiday period. So it moving into October, which is our busiest month in the industry from a group perspective, really displaced it. But if you look at the 2 months together, you can see September's up, October a little bit down, means the 2 months are fine overall. No trend line showing us we're slowing down anytime soon. And this will tell you right now that shoulders and weekdays are almost getting back to 2019 levels. The reason that matters, you cannot grow weekday and you cannot grow shoulder without growing business travel and group travel. Leisure does not grow the midweek. It is literally business travel that continues to do that for us. And the forecast looking forward actually looks pretty healthy, but I wanted to point something out here. If you look at RevPAR change, and that is the one column before the bottom, you can see RevPAR change where it says RevPAR 5% in 2023, and then it moderates to 1.4, 1.8. RevPAR in its simplest terms is rooms revenue. That just means rooms revenue or revenue driven off you staying in a room. It's basically growing at 1.8, 1.4%. Now go down to real RevPAR compared to 2019, and you can see we were down in 23 by 4.7%. It's getting worse, not better. We're down by 6.1 in 24. 25, we're going to be down by 6.7. Real RevPAR means if you factor in inflation, this is what RevPAR looks like. Because we all know the dollar today is worth much less than it was in 2019. That's the issue, and that's why hotels are struggling, and you're going to see it on the profitability side. Yes, we're hitting record revenues, but the profitability continues to go backwards. So I always get the question of, when are rates going to go down? Never. They will never go backwards because the inflation is baked in forever. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Something else that is coming up and I think needs to be on everybody's radar, the next 10 years is known as the decade of sports for the United States. And we are going to host more international events. And candidly, we were never an international host for these type of events. But we all know about the World Cup. But we forget about, we have the Winter Games, the Summer Games. We have the World Rugby Championships, both male and female. Don't forget the Paralympic Games that come with the Olympic Games. This is an international audience, and that's why it's called the Decade of Sports. I'm on the U.S. Travel Association's board. The one thing we're talking to Washington about is they got to fix the visa issue because it's a 400-day wait right now for a visa for a non-visa waiver country. So we actually are kind of poking the bear a little bit because we keep putting out statements saying, well, if you're coming for the World Cup, you better apply for your visa now. You know, and it's kind of reminding we got to fix this because the next 10 years, we're expecting 40 million international visitors that have never been a driver for us as a country as a whole. Really great for us, except the one thing I'm trying to point out to everybody, 2026. If you have meetings for 2026, specifically in the summer, but anytime in 2026, and you haven't booked them, you need to book them and book them now. We are going to take literally 12 months worth of meetings and shove them into 10 months because of what's happening. We have 16 locations that are all going to be part of the World Cup. That is going to be between June and August, and you know what, or June and September. And you know what we are finding already? Anybody who is sponsoring, and we've talked to large corporations, any of these large corporations that are sponsoring have already dictated no meetings between June and August because their corporate execs need to be wherever the sponsorships are. So you know what that means? Those meetings aren't going away. They're just getting compressed into May, into April, and on the other side of it, September and literally October. And what's going to happen here, price point is going to be set on the coast because it's going to be so expensive to get here. Yeah, and don't forget, we saw it in Paris. People that came for the Paris Olympics, we saw a double-digit increase in Germany and in Spain and Italy in travel the week before and the week after. Double-digit increases. Because if you're going to travel the world to come watch a World Cup match and watch your team, you're actually going to take the extra week to visit the rest of the United States. We are going to have so much added compression in 2026. And I know it seems so far away. In 3 months, we're a year out. That's why I keep impressing on people. If you have not booked your 2026 meetings, you need to get it on the books pretty quickly. And especially if you have stakeholders that won't kind of make the decision, they need to do that because it's only going to get more expensive and it's going to get more compressed as we start to look at that. From the hotel perspective, what I wanted to point out, you can see in the United States, this is gross operating profit margins for hotels. You can see we're going backwards, not up, which means hotels are losing money year over year from an operating profit perspective. The reason I stress this is not to say poor hotels. I have planners that will push back and tell me, I can't believe they're fighting on $5. $5 matters when the margins are this tight. The margins are razor thin. Every dollar matters. And what I consistently advise the planners, quit telling the hotels what you're looking for from a dollar perspective. Tell them what you're trying to accomplish and let them help you solve for it. Instead of saying, I need this discount, or I need this much off. Just tell them what overall you're trying to get to, because what you don't know is where the pain points are as far as cost and labor specifically, and they can help you get there. But we tend to have the wrong conversation because as soon as you demand a specific amount of a discount, that becomes a line in the sand, and that's what we start arguing about, instead of trying to work on what you're trying to get to. You know, I may not be able to give it to you on this, but I can give it to you here in your overall budget. You'll still be where you need to be. We just have to have a more adult conversation about that, if that makes sense. And I don't think it's because we don't want to. We're just moving so fast. We're not having that conversation. This is my geek chart. I know there's a lot of stuff on here, but I highlighted in yellow, and what I wanted to show you, that very first column is total RevPAR. And if you look at total RevPAR in the United States, it's grown 4%. That's really healthy growth. Now move over to my other yellow column, and that is total labor per available room, which has grown 6% in the United States. There's the problem. Number one cost in the hotel industry has been, always will be, labor. Labor. And labor is continuing to increase at a pace that is well above the pace of our RevPAR increase, which means that gross operating profit keeps going backwards, not forwards. That's going to be the challenge, and it's going to continue to be there. The other thing I know is that we're going to stay compressed for a while, but I wanted to show you the United States, we finally have a pipeline of new luxury hotels that will be coming into the market in the next couple of years. 38,000 rooms, that's a healthy version. I want to say it's somewhere, the report I saw, I think it's 5% of overall existing inventory. That's healthy. And that's going to be good competition within the market. And what's happened recently, you see the maroon on this chart? That is everything that's been built. And what you'll see is we are so far below what our normal trend lines were around building. It's the reason you feel no relaxation right now. Traditionally, we have all this extra inventory. That's what brings rates down. We don't have that in the market. We don't have enough rooms in the market to keep up with it. So what has that led to? Conversions and renovations. We have every hotel you talk to is renovating, and then we have a lot of conversions, and that is commercial real estate. That's a bank turning into a hotel. That's an office building turning into a hotel. There's a lot of that going on. Good bone structure, much easier to do that than trying to build from scratch because you already have the foundation. You just need to kind of renovate it when it's all said and done. But what I do see is a continued pipeline that's growing. The challenge is that 70% of this pipeline is still limited service. It's still a Hampton Inn, a Courtyard by Marriott. It's those type of hotels. That doesn't help you in this room because it doesn't have meeting space. So what we do see is 30% of it does have meeting space, and it's starting to come online. I told you 2026, you need to get on the books right now. I'm going to have another message for you. If you're looking for 2028, unless you're a massive, large group with a lot of space, I'd hold off. I think 2028 is the year that we start to soften as an industry in compression when it's all done. And if you're a hotelier in this room, I wouldn't be holding out for the extra $10 for 2028. I would get it on the books and get it on the books now. And the reason I'm going to show you, there's a few little pieces that are kind of moving in here. We're not even considering right now, the Austin Convention Center, they're about to go through South by Southwest. I think it's next week we start, or they may have already started this week. South by Southwest, they're going to finish South by Southwest. They're going to blow up the convention center. And they're going to start from scratch. And they're going to expand it. And they could have never renovated. They need to blow it up. So they're going to blow it up, start all over. But what that's done, we've already moved 19 groups out of Austin over the next 3 years. It will open in 2028. The Dallas Convention Center is actually closed, or not closed, but actually renovating and expanding, and have relocated 50 groups to be completed 2028. In 2028, you're going to have these 70 groups that have been pushed across the country and already compressing us in an already compressed market move back into their convention centers. All the people that benefited from those are going to be scrambling to fill at the same time we have new inventory coming online. That's why I think 2028 is going to be different. The one thing I try to do, because I think our industry talks too much on where the hockey puck is versus where it's going to be. This is where I think it's going to be. And you'll know this by mid-26. If you're a hotelier in this room, I would be watching your pace religiously for 2028 to make sure it doesn't start to slip. Because by the time you pay attention to it, it may be a little bit late, and you're going to be scrambling. And that's the one thing for the planners. That's why I said I would pause a little bit. Doesn't mean I wouldn't have it out there. I wouldn't be shopping it. I wouldn't be locking it down right now. I would give it a little bit of time to see what the environment's going to look like. Because I think the pricing power and that pressure may change just a little bit in 28. May and may not, but you'll know that in about another 12 months. We'll probably have a better indication. And if you see what's happening right now, if you don't believe it has impact, you see Houston being the #1 city right now as far as growth year over year. Is it any surprise that we basically shut down every convention center in Texas and Houston's the benefactor? You know, Houston is the one gaining it. But guess what's going to happen in 2028? Houston's going to be looking for more business because they've gotten all the business or a lot of the business that's come from these other two centers that have been closed. It will be a shift, a dramatic shift in 2028 once we get there. I wanted to show you a quick clip, and I love this quote. This is from Jeff Bezos, and I love the statement because we're always talking about what's changing in our industry, and especially around meetings. We're always talking about what's new and what's different. This was a great conversation he was having about how they built Amazon, and I love the philosophy because I do believe there's something to be taken away from our industry. So let me play this really quick, and I'll come right back to it.
There's an even more important question that I almost never get asked, and that is, what's not going to change over the next 10 years? And the reason that question is so important is you can build your plans around those things. So at Amazon, I know for a fact customers are going to want low prices 10 years from now. That's not going to change. Customers are going to want fast delivery. They're going to want big selection. So all the energy we put into those things will continue to pay dividends. It is impossible to imagine a customer coming to me 10 years from now and saying, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly. Or I love Amazon. I just wish the prices were a little higher. It's not going to happen. And so when you can figure out the things that are going to remain true under almost all circumstances, then you can put energy into them.
Think about that message. You know what's never going to change? People are going to want human connection. They're going to want to be engaged. They're going to want to come together face to face, and they're going to want to be inspired. That's not going to change. How we do it might change, but the why we're doing and what people are expecting is not going to. And I really do think we've kind of come out of the pandemic. In most cases, we were trying to figure out how to do meetings again, and I think we have forgotten sometimes on why we're doing meetings. And what I mean by that is the human engagement and the human connection. What's the objectives, not what's the mechanics. We've gotten so stuck on the mechanics of it all that we sometimes forget it's all about the humanity in the room and what we're doing to drive that and make the world just a little bit better. I'm going to skip by air because it's not that important at this point. It's doing well. The world's crazy. Can I just leave it there? And I showed this in 2024, and I was reminding everybody 60% of the world GDP had an election. And not just the US, 60% of the world GDP. 40 countries had an election. Every single major democratic free democracy in Europe has changed administrations. Every single one of them. So when you look at a G8 picture, you don't know any of them because they're all brand new. And the interesting part is around the globe, you know what was consistent? What were the issues? Inflation, immigration. Number one and number two, across the board. And there was a sweep in Europe to a more conservative party. In Germany, you have the Conservative Party taking over for the first time in 40 years. That's a shift. And don't get stuck on conservative the way we say it. It just means it is very fiscal and very much a responsibility of border lockdown. How do we fix this within our own countries? The reason I say that, it's a mess. And there's a lot of new relationships getting worked out. There's going to be a lot of relationships getting worked out. You're going to have a lot of people talking because thank God for social media. They can get out there quite often. And you will hear a lot of noise. My advice to everybody, take a deep breath. Just let's see where the dust settles. The administration right now, I always joke, seems like it's been 4 years. It's been 40 days. So we all have to take a deep breath on what the policy means as it comes in there. And I think we have forgotten, if there's one piece of advice I can give you, I think we have forgotten because this is the first time in modern history we've seen the movie. We know what it looks like. And I think we've forgotten that we have an administration and a president that negotiates in public. This happened in 2016, we just forgot about it. It happened in 2017 and we forgot about it, even the tariffs conversation. I say that to say, take a deep breath. Let's let it work itself out. 2 days ago, the markets are crashing because we're putting on tariffs in Mexico and Canada. If you didn't see today, okay, we're pausing that. And all of a sudden, the markets are up. That's my point. It's negotiation in public. I don't necessarily like the approach. It's like walking into a china shop and breaking everything at the same time and trying to get out and gluing it back together. That's kind of what we're doing. But realize that's the mode of operation right now. So my advice to you is take a deep breath. Okay, let's see where it all works out and we'll go from there. But that's why I don't want to talk about politics. Let's talk about something more fun, food costs. That's much more fun. Everything's more expensive. In first quarter of 2024, we were 18% higher than 2019 in food costs. And at the end of Q3 of 2024, it had gone up to 22% more. So when anybody's asking us, why is my budget going up for food and beverage? Because food and beverage is getting more expensive. And I did mention labor, didn't I? Labor is getting more expensive and food and beverage is getting more expensive. And Nothing is stupider than eggs right now, and we all know that. We literally put down 40 million birds because of a swine flu, and that's why this is the issue. If you did not notice, I mean, the actual increase in egg price is skyrocketing. It's at all-time highs. It's up 60% since November. It's continuing to get more expensive, so please thank the hotel for your egg breakfast this morning because it was very expensive. And that is going to continue to be a push. If you have not seen, Waffle House now has a surcharge for breakfast. And the surcharge is around eggs because eggs are not going to come down anytime soon. But coffee is at an all-time high. Great pain point in the hotels. I can't believe coffee's so expensive. Coffee price has skyrocketed and hit all-time records, and you can see how dramatic the increase has been. Nothing is more expensive than coffee except for cocoa, so chocolate is more expensive. And that is because of droughts in South America. And if you look at, on top of cocoa, olive oil is now called liquid gold. And olive oil is called liquid gold because it has increased 1,000% in pricing over the last 18 months. And we use olive oil in everything because it's healthy for us. That's the reason it is so plentiful. But droughts we all know Europe has had 2 hot summers. That has actually impacted production of olives in the Mediterranean, and that continues to be a challenge. But you want to know how crazy olive oil is? In Houston, thieves stole an 18-wheeler full of olive oil. It was worth $2.5 million. That's how expensive it is right now. Orange juice is 5 times more expensive than it was in 2019. Every time another hurricane season hits Florida hard, our orange crop does not have an opportunity to get back. These are the things. So coffee's more expensive, all-time high. Orange juice, all-time high. Eggs at an all-time high. Your breakfast budget, all-time high. Has to be. There is no exception to that. That's the realities of the world we're dealing with. They won't be there forever. They're going to be there for a while. At least through this year, we don't see it really starting to move anytime soon. And I do have this slide that shows you, this is consumer price index around the United States. It's not equal everywhere, and that's what I wanted to show you. So if you're having meetings in certain states, this is a good chart to look at, just to give you some indication. Like, if you took a meeting to Tampa this year and you're going to Chicago next year, you should know, just off the bat, Chicago's about 2% more expensive. Just before you started anything else, it's about 2% more expensive than where you just were. So I think this is a good guide for you. And the other thing that's really changed, non-alcoholic beverages are where it's at today. We have a society today that is drinking less than any time in history. It is all about non-alcoholic drinks, and we still plan parties like it's 1999. And we've got to really start to think through this. And if you look at it, for the first time in history, that red line, Gallup is telling you, for the first time in history, more people think that any drinking is bad for my health. And the interesting part is every major beverage, this is why every major beverage distributor is making a non-alcoholic beer, they're making non-alcoholic spirits, they're making non-alcoholic sparkling wines and wines. Why would they do that? Because they see the trend lines. And if they do not change, specifically the younger generations are drinking much, much less. And it's about health and wellness. It's not about anything else. You have to really think about that, and we have to be able to accommodate that for in our meetings. And I don't think we've even thought about this. There are so many people on weight loss drugs right now, and it is so prevalent. Remember, this is a diabetic drug. You know why this matters? It is changing diets after the drug, even when you're off of it. And what do all our coffee breaks have? Sugar and candy and cookies. They can't have sugar. That changes everything on how we plan meetings. And I promise you, this is going to be coming fast and furious because that side of the drug market is growing at a very rapid pace. And when we used to worry about gluten allergies and nut allergies, you're going to have people say no sugar. So how do we start to plan for that? And I say this for the hotels as well. How we design menus, we have to think about that. But you're going to be asking for people for yogurts and fruits and things that are more natural. It's coming. It is coming around the corner, and it's not going to be I'm putting candy bars and cookies out, because that's not going to sit for a large audience, and we shouldn't be eating that anyway. So we need to change it a little bit, and we need to think through that, and we don't enough. The economy, overall, the economy is doing pretty well, but this is the one thing I wanted to point out. When I tell you pricing is never going backwards, you see everything in blue here? That was inflation. That is baked in forever into our costing model in all of our society, unless we have deflation, which is nowhere in the cards. Nowhere. So why does that matter? I think it's so misrepresented when the headline is inflation is decreasing. Because what a consumer hears is things are getting cheaper. No, the rate of growth is decreasing. It means it's not getting as expensive as quickly, but nothing's getting cheaper. I think that's the disconnect. That's where you have higher consumer confidence and a lower consumer sentiment. It doesn't feel good because we all feel this inflation that's there, and it's not going anywhere. I promised Jane I would talk a little bit about our efforts around human trafficking. And human trafficking is modern day slavery, and it is something that we are not angry enough as a society, and I can't understand it when you talk about children being trafficked for sex. And the biggest thing is I think we all think it's a Liam Neeson movie, and it's happening somewhere else around the world. It's happening in your backyard, it is happening in your communities, and it is more prevalent than it ever has been before. And the issue with that is there's over 28 million people estimated that are actually part of the human trafficking network today. Most of them being children that have been trafficked for sex in the United States. And by the way, our hotels are the place that they are marketed and in most times trafficked. That's why we're so committed to it. And that's not a knock on the hotel industry. It's an easy access point. And that is why we spend a lot of time training as an industry on what to identify. And I wanted to point out, this is the one that always makes people get goosebumps. 3 years ago, the Dallas Mavericks are in the playoffs. A 15-year-old girl there with her father goes to the restroom, is taken. They find her 10 days later after she's been trafficked for 9 days, drugged out of her mind in Oklahoma. She was at an NBA playoff game. And these are the pictures of her being snatched because actually this guy convinced her to go outside because he was going to give her something. And she goes outside, gets thrown into a car. She had left her phone with her dad. She's gone. It was that quick. And by the way, when they actually arrested the ring that did this, don't be mistaken that it's all males. Six of these were females that are actually trafficking these kids. It is around the world. It is in your neighborhood. I will tell you, everybody is doing well with this. The NFL has something called It's a Penalty, but this is an international campaign around sports. During the Super Bowl in LA, sting operation with federal enforcement and local enforcement, 58 people arrested during the Super Bowl. It happens more when we come together as people. And please don't assume that because of why you're here today, that actually marks somebody off the list. I can tell you of an operation that happened in Texas just recently in Dallas, and we had a high school coach that was arrested, we had a teacher that was arrested, and we had a pastor that was arrested. So do not assume that anybody might not be involved in this. That's the message around this. It is more prevalent than you ever could imagine. Again, it's a penalty. They're running all kinds of commercials around it. And what we're finding, if you come to the ALHI website, we have all kinds of resources to help educate. You want more information, we'll tell you how. And if you're asking your question, how can you help? One message to you, when you're traveling, when you're in an airport, when you're out in public, will you please get off your phone? And will you look around? You will know what's wrong. We used to people watch. Today, we're too busy being on our phone when we're in public. It is the best thing. Most of these kids are trafficked through an airport. Our airlines are well ahead of us of being able to identify it. But here's the identifier. Middle of winter, a flight to Chicago. You've got some kid that doesn't look like they're all there. They're with one adult, usually a singular adult, no luggage, and they're dressed like they're going to a beach resort. Think about that. Why would I be in shorts and a tank top going into the middle of winter in Chicago? That makes no sense. But yet we don't pay attention to it because we're too busy looking at our scores on ESPN. That's where we have to do a better job as a community. And that's why we talk about it. And that's how you can help. Look for the signs. Again, if you come to our website, we'll tell you what those signs are. And it's all about education. But I'll move through that. And we've raised $100,000 a year at ALHI for PACT. And this is for education and for traffic victims, and we work with organizations. There's a group in here, the Aruna Project, that's one of our impact sponsors. They make good leather, they make outstanding leather goods and other promotional products that you would give away at your events, but every single person that is hired in their organization is a survivor of trafficking. Somebody that has been rescued or got away. We have a podcast at ALHI, and I had the privilege of interviewing somebody named Faith Ramos, and it was 2 years ago. And if you go to our podcast, you'll get to hear that. You'll hear from somebody, and this is when it gets really personal for me because I've gotten to know Faith, a wonderful young woman that was trafficked between 13 and 17 years old. And the first time she tried to escape, her jaw was broken, and she was literally wired shut and was in a hospital for over 2.5 weeks. So when you hear her story, and it wasn't about her, story's not about her being trafficked, it's about her getting out of that environment, and her only goal and mission in life is to help others getting out of that. And that is just a beautiful human being that can go through that kind of trauma that only wants to help others that are coming out of it. So that was my piece. Jane, she wanted to make sure, because she knows our passion around this, and we wanted to make sure to share that with you. I'm going to wrap this up because I know I'm over time here. A couple of things is looking at some of the other changes that are going on in our environment. Gen Z, I cannot stress enough, Gen Z is nothing like the millennials. Don't think they are, and don't compare them to them. And that is not a knock on the millennials. I have 3 of them. The Gen Z is different. They are the largest workforce participation rate that we have seen between 16 and 19-year-olds in over 25 years. They are literally all going to work. They're going to work part-time. They're working part-time in high school. They're working part-time in college. And, you know, and I laugh because we had this discussion. How are we going to get young people interested in working in our industry? When I look at that chart, the millennials were the ones that didn't work. So the question was, how do we get young people interested in working? It had nothing to do with our industry. They weren't working part-time during that cycle. And the interesting part, Gen Z completely reshaping the entire business model because they are going into construction, they are going to be electricians. And if you look at this gold line, we have a spike in vocational schools. What you're having with Gen Z, they are literally skipping college, going out and learning a craft and getting to work. And they are earning 6 figures getting out of school. And that is why their income has skyrocketed. No generation has ever done that. They're the fastest saving generation and the fastest increase in wages in any generation we've seen in history. And the funny thing is they've saved so much and invest so much. In their 20s, they're now buying homes right when the millennials are trying to buy homes, putting even more competition into the cycle. But they can afford the down payment. They had no other liabilities, and all they've been doing is saving during that time frame. And this is the piece that's really shifted and people don't understand. 62% of the working population today does not have a bachelor's degree. If that is a requirement for work, for any job to apply, you've limited yourself to 38% of the market. Think about that. That is a 20-year-old thought process. And I am not at all discounting school. My point is, if that is the requirement for work, Delta no longer requires it, Microsoft doesn't require it, IBM doesn't require it, because they say it doesn't matter you went to school, I got to teach you the job. Doesn't matter. So how do you think about that when you're looking for people that you need for work? And look, it's every demographic. Every demographic across the board, 60% or over 50% of that market or demographic does not have a bachelor's degree today. Doesn't mean they're not going to school, they're just not going to a 4-year degree. They're doing something, and I think if academia doesn't change and offer vocational programmings, they're gonna be dead in the water in a couple of years. Seriously, they're gonna start to feel it if they don't change their curriculum and what they're offering. Because the people that are offering are gonna continue to expand. And then this is a surprise to everybody. Fastest people back into the workforce are the boomers. It was not the great timeout, or it was not the great retirement, it was the great timeout. Boomers are coming back to the workforce, and you can see Harvard Business Review, fastest growth in the workforce is the boomer audience. So it is something to pay attention to. Nostalgia is back. Please bring it into your meetings. It is all about nostalgia. And you can see, if you think about pop culture, you know, our most popular movie in 2022 was a 50-year-old character. And in 2023, it was an 80-year-old character and another 40-year-old character in Super Mario Brothers. And if you think about this year, one of the most popular movies was Beetlejuice. 30 years old, but something that our kids had seen, our family had seen. We've all been transferred because everything is accessible 24/7. There is no more generation. It is literally being transferred into all generations. And if you did not see, the Oscar Mayer re-released their little kid on the pier singing "My Baloney Has a First Name." They actually re-released that during Thanksgiving, during the NFL, and they actually have a contest going on. If you send in your own jingle, singing that jingle, they'll send you lunch meats. And for someone who grew up in the South, fried bologna sandwiches, still where it's at. It's okay. So wrapping this up, if you want to change behavior, make things fun. Don't punish, don't threaten, make things fun, and you will get people to do what you want to do. Perfect example, this is a London park where literally you can see there's not a single cigarette right now on the ground. This park had an issue, cigarettes littered everywhere. They had cops in there, they had fines, they were threatening people, they could not stop it. You know how they stopped it? They actually put this in there and says, who's the best soccer player in the world? Messi or Ronaldo, and you vote with your cigarette. No more cigarette butts because you have a reason and a purpose to put it somewhere. If you want to change behavior, make it fun. And I always say life is all about perspective. And I told Jane, she has tried for 2 years. I tried to help her 1 year of getting Denzel Washington here because I have a friend of mine that's a planner that actually knows Denzel well. He couldn't be here in person, but I wanted to end with this quick video of his that I think is just the right message.
I'm particularly proud and happy about the young filmmakers, actors, singers, writers, producers that are coming up behind my generation. In particular, Barry Jenkins. Young people understand this young man made 10, 15, 20 short films before he got the opportunity to make Moonlight. So never give up. Without commitment, you'll never start. But more importantly, without consistency, you'll never finish. It's not easy. If it was easy, there'd be no Kerry Washington. If it was easy, there'd be no Taraji Henson, P. Henson. If it were easy, there'd be no Octavia Spencer. But not only that, if it were easy, there'd be no Viola Davis. If it were easy, there'd be no Michael T. Williamson, no Stephen McKinley Henderson, no Russell Hornsby. If it were easy, there'd be no Denzel Washington. So keep working, keep striving, never give up, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. So keep moving, keep growing, keep learning. See you at work.
What a great message. And with that, I'll see you at work. Thank you. Thank you for having me.